What is neuro-linguistic programming? I have probably given this definition more than 100 times, and every time it's a little bit different. But today I have a special guest who's going to help me define it. That guest is Sid Jacobson. He's a PhD. He's also one of the earliest certified NLP trainers by the Society of NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming. He has worked as a researcher, trainer, consultant, and coach to professionals, hospitals, schools, clinics, businesses, and professional athletes for over 45 years. So he's got the resume. He's also authored 5 books. He holds a PhD in clinical psychology, as well as a master's in social work, and he is a master NLP trainer, as I mentioned earlier. Now, that's his more standard biography. I want to give a little more of my personal knowledge and interaction with Sid Jacobson. And I mean this in the most positive way. He is a freak of nature. I have not seen anyone with skills quite like Sid, and he's one of the ones who inspired me to really focus on my sensory acuity and calibration. I had a sense that those abilities were pretty much where everything else starts. You need to build that foundation. And when I saw Sid in action, it was confirmation that yes, that those are some of the most important skills that you can develop in neurolinguistic programming. If you ever see what Sid can do, where he can just look at you and ask you a question and be able to know how you're structuring the internal representations that cause you to come up with the answer you've come up with, it will blow your mind. I've seen it in action many times. The people who he does this with confirm it over and over. That is exactly how they're structuring their thought process. And it really seems like mind reading. And at the same time, it looks like magic. It looks like mind reading. And at the same time, he will explain to you exactly how he did it. And not many people will actually do that. And here's the other thing about Sid. I rarely endorse other NLP teachers because there aren't many out there who teach pure NLP without it being mixed in with other things. Sid is one of those guys who teaches the real thing, the real NLP. And the 3 boxes that I really need to be checked for me as a teacher before I endorse that teacher is, can they use NLP effectively on themselves and others? Sid checks that box. Does the teacher understand how NLP works and why? Now, this seems like an obvious one, but a lot of people can make NLP work, but they can't tell you why it works or how it works. Sid checks that box. Can they explain it and teach it clearly? Sid checks that box. So welcome, Sid.
You very much, Damon. So I appreciate all the endorsement as well, and I'll try to be as magical as I can. So without being ridiculous, and I appreciate our talks too. We should tell people that this particular discussion began Saturday night. And I will remember that it was Saturday night because we were just going to have a brief talk about a couple of things. And about 2.5 hours later, after we had gone down about 3 different rabbit holes, I came out of my office and my wife said, "Well, there went another Saturday night. You fell down another rabbit hole with Damon. Great." So still paying for that one. So
yeah, so now we decided let's be strategic about our rabbit holes and let's let everyone else in on that conversation. So that's what this is going to be.
Yes, inflict ourselves on a willing audience as we sometimes do.
Yeah.
So thank you. So it's an interesting, this question of what is NLP is answered so many different ways. I'll give an analogy.
Wait, we're not done. Wait, just hold on for a second. I want to say a few things before we jump into this. I also want to set the agenda of how this is going to go. So for people watching, they're going to understand like how we're going to go.
Well, this was going to be preliminary too, but go ahead.
Okay. So you're going to hear some things come from Sid that you're going to be like, wow, this is amazing. And if you want more of this, he's actually teaching a workshop for my programs. It doesn't matter which one of my programs you're in. You will get access to this free workshop. It's free for you if you're in one of my programs. So Sid is going to teach strategies. We'll talk a little bit about that later. And so if you want more of this, you can join our program. You'll find in the description below this video, our least expensive program is our NLP Practitioner program. And every single month you get a free workshop, either that I teach or I'll call a guest in to teach. And I like to call a guest in when the guest can teach that particular topic better than I can. And in this case, there's nobody who can teach strategies the way that Sid teaches NLP strategies. And that's what he'll be teaching next week. So for the agenda of how this conversation is going to go, basically we're going to tackle that question, what is NLP? Of course, Sid is my guest, so I'm going to have him go first. And then I'm going to give my explanation of it. And we're going to start off with broad strokes. Then we're going to answer a question that I'm sure Sid has gotten. I know I get it all the time. So we'll address that question. You'll find out what it is in a moment. And then we'll talk more about strategies. And we're also going to answer your questions. So if you have any questions, you can put it in the chat. Make sure, don't write paragraphs, please. Get your question down to no more than 3 sentences. It's much better if you can just do it in 1 sentence. All right, Sid.
Okay.
Unleash.
So what I was going to start with was, if you line up 10 people who do hypnosis and you ask them, what is hypnosis? You'll get 37 different answers. And I think NLP is about the same as you've experienced. So some people will just tell you it's effectiveness. It's whatever works. It's a model. It's a theory. It's something. So I like to go back historically and look at it. So let's just spend a few minutes talking about where this came from. Because if you understand it in context, the actual definition will make more sense. So the context is that Richard Bandler and John Grinder were working at UC Santa Cruz, University of California at Santa Cruz. And they wanted to do something on campus. There was some sort of campus initiative that I won't go into that they were opposed to. They didn't want to go the way that other people did. And then they found each other at a meeting and decided to talk about how to influence people about that particular issue. And then they went down their own rabbit hole of, well, what is influence? What does it mean to get somebody to change their minds, to do something, or to think something different? And they decided to do a study. Richard being an information scientist, among other things, and a Gestalt therapist, John being a linguist. They started off with a series of films that Richard had. So to back up a little more, when Fritz Perls, the developer of NLP, was working on his last book, he made the worst error you can possibly make when you're trying to write a book, which is that he died. So in the middle of this book, he died, and the publisher had all this film, mostly. I guess there might have been a little video too, but this was early days of video. So the publisher wanted to finish the book. And what the book was a series of lectures followed by a series of demonstrations. They had done a book previously called Gestalt Therapy Verbatim, which was a similar kind of book. Another publisher had done that. So they wanted to repeat the idea. So film of Perls describing certain things, certain aspects of psychology, certain aspects of how people change, and then a series of pieces of work that he was actually doing with people demonstrating those principles. It's a great idea, but they didn't have Fritz anymore. So the publisher says, and it's right in the beginning of the book, he says, I needed somebody who was an expert in film and video, who was an expert in communication, who was an expert in Gestalt therapy, and who understood the process. Somebody who was actually a technical editor as well and had that proficiency, so that they could understand what this project was and do the job that we needed done. And the person that I could think of, in fact, the only person I could think of, was a 19-year-old named Richard Bandler. So Richard was already expert in a series of fields, and this was long before NLP was even thought of. So he put that book together, but he still had access to those films and videos. So what he and John did was they looked at the things Perls was doing at those moments when the client was changing. So Fritz Perls was one of the great psychotherapists, and he was doing things that people didn't well understand. Anyone who's ever studied Gestalt therapy knows a lot of it is relying on your own intuition, your own gut feeling. The pictures that pop up in your head or words that you hear. It's all coming from your inside. It isn't something that's very systematically laid out. In fact, Gestalt theory is shot full of holes. So in doing this, what they would do is they would go to those moments in the videos where the client made some huge change. And if you've seen Gestalt therapy, you know there are a bunch of big breakthrough moments, big ahas that people have. So they went to those, backed the film up for about 2 minutes, and replayed it up to that moment where the magic happened, and mapped out what they found linguistically. Now, they were already in transformational linguistics and in general semantics. There were a bunch of, these are linguistic models, there were a bunch of patterns that people would use in language, that people are using every day. We're all using them. They wanted to find out which ones Perls was using, and there were 4 that came up over and over again. And they thought, well, this is really interesting. So Richard said to John, come into my next Gestalt group, and let's do the same thing, only you'll be watching me. I'll signal you when I think there's about to be a breakthrough based on my intuition, and you'll do the same mapping out. So they thought they knew what worked for Perls, but they found in Richard those same 4 language patterns. So then the obvious conclusion was, well, this isn't about Perls, this must be about Gestalt therapy itself. So they went to their mentor, Gregory Bateson, and told him this. And he said, well, then you need to go find somebody different as a comparison. So Virginia Satir was working in San Francisco at that point. Virginia is probably the first practicing family therapist in the world. So go see Virginia. She does these workshops, do the same thing. So they went into one of Virginia's workshops, armed with the same language patterns, came back with exactly those same 4 that Virginia used over and over again, plus 3 more. So Virginia was using 7. So they said, well, these 2 looked like they were trained on different planets, the way that they worked, but there are these common language patterns. So then they sent him down. So Bateson sent them down to see Milton Erickson in Phoenix, who was the great hypnotist. And without going into a lot of detail about Erickson, those of you that know about Erickson know he was a very unusual person. But they found the same language patterns that Erickson was using. Now, plus 5 more. So they had 12. If you watched Fritz Perls, if you watched Virginia Satir, if you watched Milton Erickson, and all these people are available on video, you can go on YouTube and find them. They looked like they were trained on different planets. They were very, very different. They didn't even get along particularly well with each other. And they didn't have the same beliefs about what worked. But their idea, Mailer and Grinder's idea was, we found something underlying their beliefs, their theories, their models of what to do with people. And it's in the language, it's in the way that they're communicating with people. We found something that's a structure that's underlying all of that. Let's see what happens if we just teach people that. So they got a bunch of therapists from the area, everyday psychotherapists from the Santa Cruz, San Francisco area, and just trained them on those language patterns, which are called the meta model. And in that process, they were creating superstars. Just that change, just understanding how to ask and answer questions, just how to listen to people and elicit from them what was going on inside, changed these people's ability so that they were so much better than they had been that it was very, very dramatic. And they thought, well, we've really discovered something here, but this wasn't about psychotherapy. This was always about influence. So let's go look at a whole other field. So they started studying salespeople and found exactly the same patterns, those same 12 patterns of the meta model used in exactly the same way. So in the early days of NLP training, when I was trained back in the late 70s, the composition of the training group was usually about half business people, mostly salespeople, and about half therapists. And as one of the typical exercises, all the therapists would have to go out into the community and sell people stuff. And all of the salespeople would have to sit and do therapy with people. And they did quite well in both groups because they were armed with the same basic tool. What worked? What worked was the communication. What worked was the ability to influence people to do things. So Richard ended up writing up these patterns in a book. It says Richard Bandler and John Grinder, but this was actually Richard's master's thesis called The Structure of Magic, Volume 1, which describes basically the meta model, how it's used. And it
And
was
I just
called
want
The
to
Structure
say,
of Magic because it looked like magic.
yeah, I
So
just want to say
go
before
ahead.
people go run out and read that book, uh,
Don't.
don't.
Save yourselves.
Yes, unless you want something that's going to put you to sleep because you have insomnia. Yeah, don't read that book. I'm always impressed when people come to me and they say, "Well, I started with the first book and I read it," and I'm like, "You actually read that? Did you take
Right.
any meaning?" I
Yeah.
have gone back and read it myself, but after reading and understanding more about what
Right.
NLP is, now it makes
Well, that's
more
right.
sense. But it's not the kind of book that you want to start with for sure. Um,
Absolutely
so
not.
so Sid, let's just launch into this with if somebody came to you off the street and just said, "What is NLP?" and you want to answer this in broad strokes that anyone can understand. We will get into the weeds later. So this is your broad strokes explanation, and then I'll give mine. And by the way, the importance of I think it's really important to learn NLP from multiple teachers. Like I don't ever tell
I agree.
people only learn NLP
Yes.
from me. And
True.
so Sid and I might disagree on some things. More than likely, we're not going to disagree. It's just going to be contrasting opinions, and that's really where the magic is. That the discrepancy between how I perceive NLP and how he perceives NLP, that's where you're going to find that's where the true gold is. It's not just in my perspective, it's not just in Sid's perspective, it's in bringing those two perspectives together and then finding where they differ, where you're going to get the most out of this.
So the upshot of Bandler and Grinder studying this and developing the meta model was they realized that they had also developed something else. They developed a system for modeling people that they called human modeling. So how does somebody do something? Wow, we figured out how the best therapists in the 20th century were able to help people. We could do this with lots of other stuff. We just did it with salespeople too and found the same things. We can probably do this with lots of stuff. So the idea of NLP started off with the idea of modeling things, finding out what works and how to make them better. So what is it that we were remodeling? We're modeling how people are thinking, how they're experiencing things, how are they seeing, hearing, feeling, smelling, and tasting. There are five senses. In sensory terms, we're finding out how people's internal processing, their thinking processes and experiencing processes come up with something. They then realized this is something that we can really package so that we can model other things, package those things, and give them to people as techniques or as methods. But the methodology that does that is studying the structure of how people think. So if you go to a book called NLP Volume 1, don't run out and buy that one either.
I was going to say the same thing. Like, yeah,
Written by
not a
yeah,
good one.
Robert Dilts, and then Richard Bandler, John Grinder, Judy Delosier, and originally Leslie Cameron Bandler was on there as well. If you pick up that book, it says Neuro-Linguistic Programming Volume 1, and the subtitle is The Study of the Structure of Subjective Experience. That's the formal definition of NLP. So what is NLP? It's a field of study. We study how people think and experience the world and what the structure of their thinking is, so that if there's some issue, some problem that they run into that needs solving, we can solve it at the structural level, get them to change how they're thinking about it. Not the content of what they're thinking, but the way that they're thinking about it. And if we find somebody who's really good at something, we can find the same thing. What's the structure that's underlying how they think about and experience what they're doing, so that we can pull those things out and package them. And obviously, if somebody has a problem of some sort, we can figure out what the structure is that's leading to that and help them change that so that they lead somewhere other than that problem. If it's somebody that we're trying to emulate, somebody who's really excellent at something, we pull out that structure so we can package it and give it to other people so they can be effective as well. So NLP is a study, it's a field of study. We study how people experience the world, their subjective experience, not objectively how the world is, but how people perceive the world, and what is the structure of that thinking, that experience, so that we can do something with it, either control it, match it, change it, whatever. That's my definition of NLP. That's the one that I've had since the early days of NLP. And let me just say, too, those first few books, The Structure of Magic Volume 1, The Structure of Magic Volume 2, which is kind of a mess, were great books on linguistics, on understanding how the language part worked. The next two books were called Patterns of the Hypnotic Techniques of Milton H. Erickson, MD. Do not go out and buy those either. They are wonderful books for learning hypnosis. The next book was NLP Volume 1, which was actually Robert Dilts's undergraduate honors thesis. He wrote that book as an undergraduate, and it's awesome and really difficult. All of those 5 books are, with the exception of Magic 2, the Structure of Magic Volume 2. We just don't recommend that one anymore. But the other 4, Magic 1 and the Patterns books and NLP Volume 1, are absolutely recommended for NLP practitioners, people who are really studying, who want to go into depth with how things work. Otherwise, save yourself. And
Exactly.
the ones that came out after that immediately were a series of books that were transcripts of workshops, Frogs into Princes being the most famous, but there are a bunch of other ones as well. Those were a little more accessible, but mostly by therapists or people who had a lot of training in that kind of thinking. So yeah, like you, Damon, we always need to caution people about the literature out there, because you can hurt your brain starting in the wrong spot. Desperately, you can hurt your brain.
Yeah, so to tee up my explanation of what NLP is, I'd like to just ask you this question, because this is where I start with my explanation of NLP, is why would anyone want to learn it?
So for me, anyone who wants to understand, there's several reasons. Anybody who wants to understand how people really work should learn NLP, if for no other reason that they understand themselves better. That's the first reason. The second reason is, if people are in any kind of profession where their job is to help, change, influence, affect other people directly, sales, management, counseling, therapy, medicine, any of those kinds of fields, the set of tools that are in NLP can help you be with those people in a way that will help them take what you have to offer them. If you go to, let me just use this example. If you go to a doctor that you don't understand, or worse, a doctor that you know doesn't understand you, how much help are you going to get from that person? Any kind of doctor. Not as much as if all of a sudden, when you're sitting with that person, you click immediately. You know that they understand you, they know where you're coming from, and you understand them, and you're able to communicate whatever is going on inside of you in a way that the two of you can utilize to come up with a plan to help you be better. And it doesn't matter if this is a medical or mental health issue, or you're an eye doctor, an ear doctor, doesn't matter what it is. You want to have good communication. And
I would say also even sales. Like, as a
oh,
salesperson,
absolutely.
that
Oh, absolutely.
my sales, when I started applying this, it's like, what is the best thing that you can do as a salesperson? It's understand who your prospect is and be able to speak to their pain and have a solution for them. And NLP does that so incredibly well. And most people
Yeah,
think about it in terms of like manipulation, and it's like, yeah, you could do that, but then you're not going to have any repeat business, and people are going to hate you. And we know better than this as salespeople. We know better than this as business people.
right.
So you can do it for that, but yeah, you're going to collapse your business. But you can also use NLP to really create those connections so that the people want to come back and do more business with you. It's because you understand them, and not in a fake way, but you actually truly do understand them.
Right. And in fact, I was, again, just choosing medicine as one example,
Mm.
certainly management, and not even
Yeah.
just sales. Anybody who manages other people, or especially HR people who are trying to help people do their work as well as they can. Just anyone who's trying to communicate with others. And finally, anybody who's going through any kind of a big change in their own life, or is trying to make a big change in their own life, and has found themselves to be stuck in some way, or has
Mhm.
reached some kind of a plateau, and they would like to lift themselves up past that. Finding out how you work inside is a great way to do that. It's a great start. Without knowing how you work, how are you going to know what to change?
Or
Most people. Hmm?
more importantly, the unconscious structures that are holding that in place so that you keep repeating and creating the same reality over and over again. If you can get in there and be
Right.
conscious of it, now that you can change that structure, and then you can start to change it in a direction that serves you and gets you unstuck and moving in where you want to go.
And interestingly to me, I was talking with somebody about this recently. Most people, when they have any kind of a challenge in their lives, and this is genetically hardwired in. I'm absolutely sure of this. We wouldn't survive as a species without this, but our natural tendency is to look outside of ourselves. What is causing me this grief? What is the outside thing that is impinging on my success or my ability to do whatever I'm trying to do? What is it that's stopping me from learning what I need to learn? And we look to the outside, and when we look to the outside, we're not looking to the inside because our attention is divided. We can only pay attention to so many things at once. So we need to learn to pay attention to what's going on the inside. We need to know how we work, and we can't know that unless we have some kind of a system for looking inside. And
Mm.
some people say, "Well, I looked inside, I felt bad, so then that's all I need to know." Well, that's not very specific. What got you to feel bad? Here's one of the other pieces about this that I think is important, and it's part of what we pay attention to in NLP. Most people, when they have a problem, if you ask them, where does the problem start? They'll say, well, it starts when I feel bad.
Mm,
That's not where it starts.
that's the end.
Right. That's the wrong place. Nothing starts with a bad feeling. Bad feelings, good feelings, any feelings are created because we saw something, heard something, smelled something, or tasted something. I had some food last night that was given to us, actually 2 nights ago, that I tasted. I got a bad feeling. It was horrible. That's pretty rare for me too. We got something that just wasn't good. Somebody did something wrong. And but I wouldn't say, oh, it started with a bad taste. Well, it did start that way. It started with the food. The food
Mhm.
created the bad taste. It's the same for most of the things that bother us inside. We look to the outside for what's causing that. But a lot of times, what's causing it is on the inside. So a
Mm.
lot of times, we'll see something or hear something from somebody on the outside, and it will trigger something inside first. Maybe it will remind us of another time when we felt bad. That memory is probably what's making us feel bad, at least as much as that person on the outside, which isn't to say people on the outside can't make us feel things. Obviously, they can. If somebody's screaming at you or throwing things at you, it's not going to feel good. But for the most part, if we understand how we structure that inside, we can do something about that so that when somebody is communicating to us from the outside in a way that we don't like, we have some defense against that. And I think that that's important too. So my final reason, the fourth reason that I'll tell you about why I think people should learn NLP is self-defense. how to
Interesting.
keep the world out there from impinging on us in ways that prevent us from being who we are and the best that we can be.
Great. All right. Well, it's my turn to give my explanation of what NLP is. And unfortunately, I don't think there's anything in my explanation that's going to disagree with yours. I was kind of hoping there would be to kind of
Yeah.
tease out some
So you could say,
distinctions
Sid,
here.
you're wrong. Yeah, really.
But what is interesting is like, and this is why I wanted you on, your explanation of it is, it sounds like someone who's not only done the experience and the practicing of it, but you've also done the academic side of it. When people, I think somebody put a comment up here that it's NLP is nonsense or something like that. It's like, okay, well, we have you, Sid, science very well. You had to write papers, and put that
Yeah,
out there and be peer reviewed. And so obviously there's something here. I don't tend to worry too much about that because it's like I know it gets me results, and I'm not looking to be an academic and I totally respect doing that if that's what you want to do and you feel
right.
called to do that. It's just not the calling that I felt called to do. For me, I was just trying to fix my marriage and my business, and I was like, and I kept falling into depression. So I was, and my first like real experience. Was with someone I think you knew Donald Hank.
Oh, Don Hanks, sure.
Don Hanks, yeah.
I did
Unfortunately,
well.
he's
Yeah.
passed on. But I tell the story about my professor who basically cured me of depression in one session, and that was him. And I remember thinking from that point on, somewhere down the line, I'm going to have to learn NLP. It's just I wasn't focused on that at the time.
Yeah, I'm
Uh,
trying to remember who trained him. Oh, yeah, that was me. Okay, got
are you serious?
it. Yeah.
You trained him? I did not know that. I did not know
Don and I were
that.
friends here, yes, and his wife as well. Yeah,
That's awesome.
they were
Okay, I
they were
didn't know
people
that
that I knew
connection.
well.
I knew you knew him, but I didn't know that you had trained him. Okay. Well, I write about this in my book, which hopefully comes out this year, but maybe not. It might come out next year. But I write about this in my book, and wow, that what an interesting coincidence. I did not know that. Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. All right,
New Orleans is a small place, Damon.
it's true. It's true. Yeah. All right. So my definition, or how I would explain what NLP is. What is the most precious currency in life? Meaning and purpose. And it's happening whether you're realizing it or not. We are creating meaning and purpose all the time. And that is true even if your life feels meaningless or purposeless. That is attaching a meaning or a purpose to that. Without us doing that, there probably is an objective reality that's just kind of carrying on without us. But your experience of it cannot be separate from some sort of meaning and some sort of purpose, and you're creating it. And there is a structure to that. So, doesn't it make sense that you would want to not only learn that structure, but master that structure? Because if you can master that structure, then you master your reality. You master how you create meaning and purpose. It is not going to be found in the content of your experiences. It will not be found in you trying to run out there and create new experiences that are different or trying to be different or trying to change yourself. If you don't restructure and recode what's already there to serve you better and to serve your meanings and purposes that you want to serve better, you can run out there and try to have whatever new experiences you want, and it's probably not going to change really anything because it all is held together in structure. So if you think about all of your beliefs that you have right now, especially the unconscious ones, because those are the ones that are really controlling your reality, your behavior, everything that you do, those have a structure to them. And what they do is they select and collect information so that the information you're selecting and collecting align with those beliefs, even if those beliefs are negative, even if they're limited, because to not do that would create a sense of cognitive dissonance and being lost and confused about who you are and about reality. And that is the absolute scariest thing. I've experienced it before. Um, that is what we will run from. We would rather be we would rather align with beliefs that are limiting and make us feel bad about ourselves before allowing ourselves to slip into utter confusion about who we are. So those beliefs are designed to select and collect information to keep you exactly where you are. NLP is about going in there, revealing the structure behind it, bring that from the unconscious to the consciousness, change those structures so that that information now serves you, that you're now highlighting the information of your lived experiences to focus on how you want to be and how do you want to do that going forward. And when your unconscious is then restructured that way to put your attention there, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy going forward. And it's real to you because you actually lived it. We're not faking anything here. And that's the key to what makes NLP so fast and so good, is that we're not bouncing against content. We're going in and changing structure. And the structure is what truly tells you what meaning and purpose to make of your experiences. So we go in there and we change structure, which is really fast. It's so much easier and faster to change structure rather than trying to change content or trying to force it. And that's what like fake it till you make it and affirmations are trying to do. It's trying to deceive you into thinking about what has happened differently without altering that structure. You have to alter that
Right.
structure, otherwise that structure will continue to select and collect information to support your limiting beliefs and the meanings that are not serving you. So I can't think of anything that's more important in life if you want to live a fulfilling, meaningful, purposeful life than understanding that structure so that you can restructure, recode your experiences so that they serve you. Even the negative ones, even the mistakes, like we still count that. But if they're not structured properly, then that appears to be more your reality than the good stuff. And so what happens is you believe you are the negative or the limitation that that structure is calling your attention to, and then you don't improve because you just believe that's who I am and there's nothing I can do about it. So I could go on and on about this, but I'll
Yeah.
I'll take a step back and say, okay, Sid, you've been doing this a lot longer than I have. What do you think of that explanation?
Well, I agree with it. Again, sorry, we have nothing to argue about here. And what I'll say is this, going back to the comment that I didn't read up there, but you said someone said that it's unscientific or whatever it was that their comment was. And we get that a lot. It's very interesting. I remember when I was in college, I studied all the sciences because I was in a pre-med program, but I was a psychology major. And I remember one of my teachers, I believe it was one of my physics professors, saying, "Oh, psychology, that's a pseudoscience. That doesn't even belong in the science department." And there was actually some debate about that when I was in school because psychology, where I went to school, was in the science department. It was one of the hard sciences because we had a research department. I took 11 psychology courses and 9 of them had labs. So it was that kind of psychology. I knew a lot about rats and pigeons and monkeys, and I didn't know anything about people, but I knew a whole lot about rats. And people would ask me afterwards, "Well, you have a degree in psychology. What can you do?" And I say, "If you have a rat with a behavioral disorder, I'm your man." You know, but but I didn't know anything about people, and I ended up working in psychiatric hospitals for a couple of years, 2 of them. And then one of my mentors at one of those hospitals was this brilliant woman who was a fantastic therapist. And she said, "You need to go get a master's in social work. That's where you belong because you've got the gift, you've got the intuition, you've got the heart to go help people with stuff that works." And I was already doing good work there in the hospital because I'd been training with some good people on the job. And I had good they
Oh, I think we lost you, Sid. Oh, okay. Hopefully that works out and he comes back while we wait for that. He was already naturally going to the next part of, oh, he's back. Can you, I can't hear you, but we can see you. All right, so Yulia, would you work with him until we can get this sorted out? And in the meantime, I'm going to launch into the next part of this, and hopefully by the time I say my piece on it, he'll be back, and then we can get his explanation on it. So and where he seemed to be naturally going was, is NLP a pseudoscience, and how do you tackle that question? Is NLP a pseudoscience? And I've also, just like explaining what NLP is, I've tackled this question in so many different ways, and I was very curious. I am very curious what Sid will say about this, but I'll go ahead and launch into my piece, and hopefully by the time I'm done, the technical issues will be solved. So when we think about what science is and what it is not, and what is a pseudoscience and what it is not. So a pseudoscience is something, well, let's start with science. Science is about looking at things and trying to find an objective truth about it. And by the way, I have zero hostility towards science. I love science. I think it's wonderful. A lot of times people think that if because you're into NLP that you're somehow against science. And unfortunately, there are some NLP practitioners who do act that way. That's not me. I love science. Science teaches us so much. What the ideal of science is, finding that objective truth, is an ideal that can never be satisfied. It can never be fulfilled because we can never truly find objective truth. And even in science, they talk about that is an impossibility. Everything is a theory. We have settled science, but nothing is completely the truth because there's always more information to learn about it. Okay, so that's science. Well, what is NLP? NLP is not the study of objective truth. We're not looking for objective truth. We know that we cannot find absolute objective truth. What we're interested in is what is real to us. And that's always going to come through our subjective filters. So what Grinder and Bandler did when they were creating NLP is, instead of looking outwardly to find objective truth, how does one create their own truth, their own meaning, their own purpose? Why don't we turn the attention onto subjectivity and study that? And what's amazing to me is that in recorded history, maybe it occurred before, but we don't have any records of it. For the first time in recorded history, we turn the lens on itself. We turn the camera on itself and we say, okay, this thing that is perceiving what we're trying to find objective truth, what is that mechanism and how does that work? And how does it prevent us from ever knowing objective truth? And that is the study of NLP. And we already had pre-existing maps for this because everything is a map. There is no direct connection to reality. You're not experiencing a direct connection to reality happening around you. You're experiencing your map of reality. You cannot handle all of the information coming at you all at once. So we have to create a map to navigate that reality. And so what NLP is, it's the study of that, how we create that map and how we can change that map to suit us. And accuracy is a part of that map. So when people come and say, oh, you NLP people, you think you can just make up your reality, it's like, no, we don't believe that. Accuracy is a part of what makes a good map. Also resourcefulness and also choice. So within that, there's so much remapping that we can do. Now, you talking about it like this makes it sound a little bit like esoteric and out of reach, but you're already using one of those maps of reality right now by understanding me. If you understand the English language, we are sharing a map of reality right now because I'm able to use a code with verbal sounds that makes it possible for you to understand the representations that are inside of me that I'm communicating to you, and you're making those representations in your mind. And we're doing this through language. Because every word that I'm saying, I'm not having to give you a visual representation of it in front of you right now. You're able to understand everything that I'm saying because my verbal coding causes you to represent what I'm saying in your own mind, right? So I am sharing with you a map of reality through language, and language is absolutely a map of reality. So when someone says, isn't NLP a pseudoscience, then I would have the same question about language. So is language a pseudoscience? And that would just sound very strange, like, well, that doesn't even sound like that question fits. And I say, exactly. So that question asking if, you know, NLP is a pseudoscience, it's not trying to be a science. It's not. It's what it is it's a technology, a system of techniques to discover and understand how we're creating our subjective reality, which is always going to be a little bit different for every single person. But what we're looking for are those universal structures that we find in all people when creating our subjective realities. Language is one of them, and more specifically, specific language patterns. And that's where NLP started, like Sid was talking about, was creating those, well, was discovering those language patterns that was common to all of these change workers, whether it was therapists or salespeople. So another way to say this is like when people, so I practice yoga, and if somebody said, isn't NLP a pseudoscience? I would say, well, is yoga a pseudoscience? Again, it just sounds so strange to ask that question. I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu a pseudoscience? It sounds so strange. It's not trying to be a science. So how can it be a pseudoscience? So that's what I tell people as well, that if NLP, for it to be a pseudoscience, would first have to be trying to pass itself off as a science, and that's not what it's doing. It's closer to what we would call a model, the way that language is a model for reality. Yoga is a model, and it's a model for, it has various uses. It could be for physical exercise. It also could just be for general well-being. It doesn't work for everybody. It works for some people. The same thing with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's just a model for self-defense. And its usefulness is tested in the actual interactions you have when you spar or you fight with someone. And so NLP is the same way. You can try an NLP technique, and the first 10 times you try it, it doesn't work. But then you keep modifying it until you find its usefulness or you find why it works. When I first started learning NLP and I was doing matching and mirroring with people, it wasn't working for me. I was doing the technique, but what I didn't understand was I was putting all of the emphasis on myself, trying to match and mirror perfectly. And what I realized in the process was, no, I needed to put all my attention on the other person. That's why this works. And then you start to naturally match and mirror people when you're putting all of your attention on them. And this is also what happens when we feel a connection with someone. We're giving them a lot of attention, and we're not just thinking about the next thing that we want to say. We're actually listening to people. And that creates a certain kind of connection. And that's where the matching and mirroring becomes very natural. So it doesn't look like we're getting Sid back. I don't know what technical difficulties are happening over there. Um, if you do want to see Sid in action, teaching strategies, which is what I think he's the best at and so masterful. And another interesting thing is, like, I don't know of anyone else who's teaching strategies these days. It's kind of a lost art, and it was a necessary part of the evolution of NLP. And so people who really want to understand how NLP works, and along with kind of the history of its evolution, that's where strategies is there. It's so fun to learn. It'll heighten all of your other NLP skills, especially your sensory acuity and your calibration skills. And so next week, Sid will be teaching a workshop for anybody who's in any of my current membership programs. So it doesn't matter if you're in the self-concept one or the ultimate practitioner or even the coaches training for self-concept. Everyone who's in any of these programs has free access to these workshops that we do every single month. And like I said, I like to bring in guest teachers when it's a part of NLP that I feel like someone else can teach better than I can. And Sid can absolutely teach strategies better than I can. That's why I'm bringing him in. And so just know too that, sometimes we bring in teachers, sometimes I teach the workshop, but they're always free for everyone who's in the membership. All right, so I want to check with my assistant slash wife. Did you hear anything from Sid about what? Oh, that's unfortunate. Yeah, so can everyone hear what you're saying, or only can I? I'm the only one. Okay, so what's the question again? Oh, how can I think about unconscious beliefs and explore that structure? So my first answer to this is learn NLP. NLP is the practice of being able to do that, right? It's a practice of bringing these unconscious structures into consciousness. So there's endless amounts of techniques to do that. And the first one that comes to mind is the one that we were talking about earlier. It was the first model, which is the meta model. So what the meta model does is it's a way of training your mind on linguistic patterns that are the linguistic patterns that usually create problems and limitations in your map of reality. So by being able to tune your ears to that, you can catch those patterns, and then there's meta model questions that you would ask someone or yourself to tease out those limitations, those deletions, distortions, whatever's creating the problem, so that you go back into what we call deeper structure, which is getting out of the sort of abstractions of our words and getting back into the real lived experiences that you've had, and reconnecting you with that lived experience, so then you can find the resources and information you need to be able to remedy that. Sid, you're back. Awesome.
I don't know where I went. I apologize. I have no clue what happened. I finally was able to get another network to work, and here we are. So I'm
Okay.
sure whatever you said was really brilliant. And
Well, I wish you heard it, because I'd like you to maybe respond to it. So I'll give you a very brief. So the question we
okay,
want to tackle right now is when people ask, and you were kind of going in this direction before you disappeared on us, about NLP being a pseudoscience. And what I say to that is, like, would you ever say is language a pseudoscience? That wouldn't even make any sense. Is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu a pseudoscience, or yoga? And with language, especially because we use that's the linguistic part of NLP, is that
sure,
we're sharing right now a map of reality. And that is, I can emit
that's
these
right.
verbal sounds,
Hmm.
and in that coding, you understand what I'm saying well enough that we're having a shared experience. If I say the word apple, it's not like an apple flies out of my mouth, and so you know what I'm talking about. You hear the verbal sounds, and you make that representation in your mind of what an apple is, and that's how you understand what I'm saying. So we're doing it right now. The language is a mapping of reality so that we can share it and communicate it to others without having to,
Hmm.
if I said rock, I have to go and show you a rock, or, it's like, no, I
Right.
can just say the word and you know what I'm talking about. So when people say, like, is NLP a pseudoscience, it's like, is language a pseudoscience? Like, it doesn't make any sense. So anyway, how would you answer that question?
Slightly differently, in just from an academic point of view, which I'm not an academic by training. I was a practitioner by training, but I was trained as a social worker and a clinical psychologist, and as an NLP practitioner, and then master practitioner and trainer. So there was a committee developed years ago. This would have been in the late 80s, around 1985 and 6. There's an organization called the National Science Foundation that actually makes a decision on is something a science or not a science. And NLP was challenged, and a bunch of Richard Bandler, Robert Dilts, other people went and talked to these people and met with them. The upshot of all the discussions and all the background research they did was NLP wasn't developed the way other sciences are often developed, but that doesn't say anything bad about it. And this was done on behalf of the US Army because the Army was wanting to use lots of NLP to do research and to implement it into some management training and some other things. The the decision by the National Science Foundation was, well, okay, a lot of this stuff looks like it works really well, but we can't make a judgment whether or not that meets scientific, um, rigidity in terms of following the rules, of having this kind of research and this kind of data and this kind of replication of studies and all that. So, Army, go ahead and do what you're doing. Just make sure that you have some way of measuring the effectiveness. And unfortunately, a lot of people came out of that who heard about that and said, see, NLP is not a science. The National Foundation says so. National Science Foundation says so, which they didn't. People simply took what they said and made it mean what they wanted it to mean, as we've been talking about. People make meaning out of everything. I, at the time, was doing research for the U.S. Army. And the research that we did was incredibly successful and extremely effective. And they were thrilled to have it. So rather than relying on academic rigidity or academic rules for whether or not something works, test it. One of
Yes.
the things that every person using NLP should be doing is every time they do a piece of work, especially if you're doing something therapeutic or coaching, counseling with somebody, when you're done with whatever you just did, test it and make sure it worked. And as long as it does, that should give you confidence that what you did was effective because it worked right in front of you. So rather than going for academic rigor, I go for practical value, usefulness, as you were just saying. If it doesn't work, if what you're doing doesn't work, do something different. That also doesn't mean that NLP doesn't work. And that's one of the other mistakes people make. They'll do something, have it not work, and say, see, NLP doesn't work. And
Mhm.
you ask them what they did, and they give you mind-boggling
Yeah.
descriptions of things.
Yeah.
And you go, what was that? They say, well, I learned it from an NLP. Okay, great. That didn't recognize, I don't recognize that as NLP. So
Also, some of this takes skill. Like
well,
when I first went to
right, my point.
yeah,
Yeah,
when I first went to my first Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class, they teach an arm bar. And guess what? When we started sparring, especially against black belts and brown belts, I couldn't pull an arm bar on them. Does that mean that arm bars don't work? Oh,
right.
yes, they do work because they were pulling the arm bar on me. So it's like
Right.
you have to have some ability and skill. It does take
Yes,
skill to make
that's
NLP
right.
work.
That's right. And one of the things that I always stress to people is that they're going to have to practice because the skills don't come because you just decree that you are now skilled. They don't
Mhm.
come with a certificate or with a book that you've read or with anything else. They come from actual practice. And that's not something everybody is willing to do. Also,
Yeah.
I have to say, a lot of people who have a really negative view of NLP have a really negative view of the experience they had with somebody who said they were doing NLP. And that
Yeah.
person may have been very competent and very skilled, and what they did with that in that particular instance wasn't effective. I'm willing to say when I haven't been effective in the past, I wasn't effective. That was about me. I didn't get the outcome that I wanted. I wish I could do it again, or I wish I had more time, or I wish I'd tried something different. So just because you know NLP doesn't mean you're going to be perfect every time with everybody. You still have to have your perception. You have to have your ability to make a solid relationship with somebody, to develop a rapport where you can understand how that person operates in the world and they can understand you, where there's a certain amount of trust developed. And then on top of all that, exercise your skills. Here's one other thing, too, because I've had this happen a number of times, and I've seen it on video with Richard Bandler working with people. You'll give somebody something to do, and they'll look at you and say, oh, I just tried, it didn't work. And we know by watching them that they didn't do it.
Mm.
So, of course, it didn't work. That's a relationship issue, not a technical issue. It means at that point that that person didn't feel safe enough or comfortable enough with you or trust you enough to actually do what you asked them to do. And this is something that people have to make a distinction about. And the reason I stress this is because, as you know, Damon, we have seen people who are NLP trainers who can be, what would the word be? I think the technical term is assholes. And they could just be nasty to people and
Mhm.
forceful and powerful and say, you're going to, and then the person doesn't do it. And it doesn't have anything to do with NLP. That has to do with the relationship. And I think it's important that people don't confuse those things. People confuse those things going back to the time of Freud. I mean, this has happened in every therapeutic milieu that's ever come out and every business aspect that's ever come out. I've been to an awful lot of sales seminars and marketing seminars where I could not stand the person teaching. It doesn't mean what they had to teach wasn't valuable. but it does mean that I don't have anything to do with that person. I can make that distinction. I can say, I don't like that person. I don't trust them. I'm not going to do business with them. And they've got good stuff.
Hmm.
I can
Yeah,
say the same
absolutely.
thing about therapists that I've met. There was one therapist who was, I won't name him, he is extremely famous in the history of therapy, and he was the most dangerous therapist I've ever seen. And when you looked into his background, he had more suicides in his practice than just about anybody. And all you had to do was watch the way he worked with people. And yet, a lot of the technical things that he developed, a lot of the procedures and processes were magnificent. People that I knew and I and other friends of ours had been using those things for a couple of years
Mm.
very successfully before we met him. He
Was he an
came in and
NLPer?
made a mess. No,
Was he
he
an
was
NLPer?
pre NLP.
Okay.
Very famous. One of the people who does a kind of a body therapy that I'm just not going
Okay.
to talk
I,
about
I want
any.
to hear. I want to hear the
You and
name.
I. Well, I'll give you the name.
All right. I want to hear the
When
name after we're off
I'll tell you
the
the name.
record.
You can go look at one of his books. Uh,
Okay. So we're kind of running out of time. So two things. Well, I want to get to see if anyone has any questions. So if anyone watching has any questions, please put them in there now, and just try to keep it to like one or two sentences, no paragraphs, please.
yeah, they've been
Um,
kind of going by as we've been talking.
yeah. Yeah.
There's
So
been a lot of them.
Yulia's is filtering them, so she's going to catch some.
Okay.
Um, Before we get into the questions, though, what are you teaching next week, and why should people want to attend that?
Strategies in NLP, again, going back to the history of NLP, they occupy a certain link in the chain of what is NLP today. Strategies are an understanding of how people are thinking in sequence in their mind, how they go from one thing to another. And what you can do with that is understand how people are getting outcomes they don't want, or outcomes that everybody would want. So this is a basic piece of the modeling process. That's the first part. The second part is they take skill in terms of sensory acuity. You have to be able to watch and listen to what people are saying,
Mhm.
noticing all of the subtle cues that people are giving. So that part takes practice.
All
I'll
right, and I
tell
just
you
want to
real
say something
quick.
real quick. This is
Okay.
where Sid's ability is off the frickin' chart. If you've seen, I used to love Sherlock Holmes growing up, and any movies where he would just look at someone and be able to say like where they're from or what their name is and all these things, and then the person would be like, "How did you know that?" Because he seems psychic, and then he explains everything that he just did and how he came to this. That's Sid. The Sid does that kind of stuff, and it seems like he's reading your mind. It's really
Yeah.
freakish, but then, just like Sherlock Holmes, he will go into explaining exactly how he did that.
Right. So I have Damon fooled completely. So, so the thing about this is, though, that when I first encountered strategies in 1978, I spent 3 days standing in front of John Grinder, who was on stage, and we just elicited strategy after strategy after strategy, and they scared the hell out of me because they seemed too complicated and too hard. And when it came time for me to teach them, I thought, I better get good at this. And I started practicing and got really, really good at it really quickly because I realized what it was that I wasn't doing and I wasn't paying close enough attention to what people were doing. And it became a staple for me. And what I've been telling people since then is this number three, if you can understand and use strategies, you can do anything in NLP, anything.
And I'll
If you
second that.
can't do that,
Yeah,
and if you can't do that, you're going to have trouble all the way down the road.
absolutely. I completely agree with that. The key there for me was the sensory acuity and calibration. It's one of the most, there's two things that are the most overlooked in NLP. That is cultivating the sensory acuity and calibration skills, which is what strategies help you do, and the meta model. So many people just overlook the meta model. It's like if you do that, you will never be able to make NLP work the way you could when you truly understand the meta model, and not just the linguistic patterns, but what's underneath it, the distortion, generalization, and deletion, how that is
Right.
constantly happening in our mapping of reality and making meaning. That is like the most brilliant contribution that the study of NLP has given the world, I think. And from there, It's
Yeah.
how far you want to take it.
Richard Bandler said the meta model is the motor that runs NLP. And I agree with
Absolutely.
that completely.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And strategies are the structure of how patterns work. They're the underlying structure of what people are doing.
So
And
if
if
you're
you can
listening,
understand that,
yeah.
you got it.
So if you're watching right now and you want to learn that, Sid will be teaching it next week. Like I said, if you're part of one of our programs, it's free. That goes with the program. You have to be in one of our programs to learn it.
Mhm.
Before we get to the questions, though, if somebody wants to see what you're up to, trainings you're doing, or if they want one-on-one coaching with you, how do they find you?
So they find me with my website, sidjacobson.com, easy to remember. The other way is on Facebook, actually. I know a lot of people watching may be already connected with me on Facebook. Um, I will be launching something new in the next couple of months for me, a whole new coaching training package that's for anybody who really wants to be very good at what they do. I'm not the guy who teaches you how to go get 12 new clients a week. I'm the guy who teaches you what to do with them once you got them. And I want people to be really, really good at what they do. And I want them to really be able to help people on a number of different levels. So I'll be using some basics in NLP, some things I've developed, some of the more advanced things in NLP, and I've got it. Uh, we're developing it in a packaged way so people can get a whole lot real fast,
And
and that'll be coming in the next couple of months.
like I said, I do not endorse many teachers because I don't feel comfortable endorsing a teacher to learn NLP from if they're not really teaching what I consider to be real NLP. Sid Jacobson is one of those people who teaches real NLP, and he can explain it incredibly well, how it works. He can break it down step by step. I feel very fortunate that I had the opportunity to train with you multiple times. Learned a lot from Sid, so you cannot go wrong under his teaching.
Thank you.
All right, so let's tackle a question here. I'm going to just give it right to you. Someone asked if wait, how did they say it? If you could choose only one technique, what would it be?
One technique in NLP,
Yeah.
that's sort of like asking if you could only fix one part of a car, which one would you concentrate on? That's not a question that makes sense to me in terms of thinking holistically.
Yeah.
You know, it would be like asking a doctor if you were only going to study one system in the body, which one would be the most important? What I will tell you is start with the basics. Learn language skills, learn rapport skills, learn how states work, learn about anchoring, learn about strategies. If you just learn those four things, those four basic pieces, you'll have the basics of what you need to be doing everything else. And let me say this too, it's something that happens with people who are learning NLP quite typically, especially when NLP is advancing so much. When you go through practitioner training, or even more so master practitioner training, you're always learning something new. And the new thing that you learn typically blows your mind in some way. And you go, wow, I want to be really good at this. Is great. I'm just going to do this from now on. And people forget the basics. And then when they can't make the advanced thing work, they don't know why. And it's because they're missing something that was fundamental. You can't skip the fundamentals. You know, years ago, I used to teach tennis. Would I just teach somebody how to serve because that's the most important shot? It wouldn't make any sense. They have to learn how to serve, and they have to learn how to hit a forehand, a backhand, and a volley. Not only that, they have to learn how to move their feet. They also have to learn how to listen to when a ball is hit by a racket because it makes a big difference. So there are fundamental aspects of everything, whether it's a game or a big process like NLP, a big set of processes and models where you have to start off. There were people, I mentioned to you before, there were people who just concentrated on a technique called reframing years
Mhm.
ago, formal reframing, sometimes called 6-step reframing. That is a wonderful procedure. And if you can't establish rapport with people, understands how states work, and observe people, you will mess it up regularly. It's just what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You've got to know the skills, the fundamentals to be able to use it. Then you can use it for lots and lots of stuff. It's a great process, even though most people don't do it anymore because it's old. It still works great. Just
Mm.
because it's old and people don't teach it anymore doesn't mean it quit working. It still works beautifully, but you got to know what you're doing. You got to have those basic skills first. Otherwise, it won't work. And then you'll say, see, NLP is no good.
Yeah. When the first time I brought you into Santa Cruz to teach for me, when I used to bring people in to do live workshops, that's what I would tell them about you. I would say, imagine someone, instead of trying to jump to the next technique, instead sat with like the basics and just spent years mastering that. And I would say, that's Sid. And then what happens is the other stuff just is easy. When you start encountering the advanced stuff, you just go,
Right.
oh yeah. So like whenever I encountered the self-concept model by my mentor, Steve Andreas, like I took to it like that. And then I was shocked when other people couldn't. And I was like, what's going on here? I was like, oh yeah, I just spent 2 years immersed in hypnosis
Right.
and NLP
Oh,
and
yeah.
practicing it over and over. So by the time I got to that model, it was just like, oh yeah, it was so natural.
Right. And that's something that happens so often with people. The other thing that happens with people is they'll be in training with a real master like Robert Dilts or Richard Bandler or somebody who is demonstrating a technique, and they do it so skillfully and so smoothly, and people will go, wow, that technique is so easy. But they forget that they were seeing and hearing a whole lot of things that other people weren't.
Yeah.
And that's important. I mean, Richard can tell you all you got to do is this, but that's not all he's doing.
No,
He's
he's done
doing
a lot
20
more.
other things simultaneously, right?
Yeah, and that can only
So,
come with practice and making it natural, just like driving a car. The first time you're doing it, like you're so conscious of everything and trying to do it, and then a year later you can have a conversation with someone and not even think about driving, and you're
right,
doing all of those things, naturally and unconsciously. Another
right.
question here, someone asked, do you take remote clients? I guess remote meaning like online, like we're doing right
Oh,
now.
I thought they were remotely taking clients. Yes, yes, I do. I do.
Okay.
Yes,
All
and I
right.
know you do too. We both
Yes.
see clients remotely.
Okay. Another question, how much does NLP and hypnosis go hand in hand? I can answer this question, but I think you could probably answer it better than I could.
Uh, NLP was built partly on understanding the work of Milton Erickson. So there's a lot of hypnosis built into NLP. Um, but let's talk about it this way. Let's talk about it in terms of states. If we talk about somebody making a change, there are a number of things that are going to change. The person's language is going to change in some way. Their experience is going to change in some way. The pictures in their head are going to be different. The things they say to themselves are going to be different. Somewhere along the line, their state of mind is going to change. That's going to be a key element to what helped that person actually make a change. That's what we understand from dealing with hypnosis. Learning how to do hypnosis helps people learn about how states of mind work. Anything you can do with hypnosis, you can do without it. It's all about understanding how people's states change. And people's states of mind change constantly. They're changing in front of you while you're talking to them all the time. You just have to learn how to perceive that, know how they're structured, and know what to do with it, and you can help somebody. You can do that with or without a formalized hypnotic induction. But I remember also doing one of the workshops that I did for you was on hypnosis.
Mhm.
And I remembered having somebody go into trance, and everyone else jumped up and said, wait a minute, you forgot to do the induction. They went into trance anyway. How'd that happen? I said, because I already noticed when they were going into trance, and I
Mhm.
did something that just helped that along. So you don't have to do ritualized, step by step hypnotic inductions. You count backwards from 10 or 3 or whatever and do stuff. You can utilize what the person is doing in their experience.
Mhm. All right. I hope we're not having another technical issue here. It's kind of slowing down.
Did
Hopefully
I
that ironed.
freeze
Yeah,
again?
I think you're coming back. One of the things I remember that hypnosis workshop that you taught here in Santa Cruz for me was when we went to lunch. It was in a hotel. So we go to lunch, and everybody's sitting at a big table. And so the waitress comes over, and she knows we're the ones renting the conference room. And she goes, "Oh, so what are you guys here for?" And we said, "Hypnosis training." And I remember she just froze. And then she kind of backed away from the table, and she was a little worried. And I just think that that was hilarious because of some people's perceptions about hypnosis. Like we were somehow going to, in ordering our food, we were going to hypnotize her and have her do something, that she didn't want to do. I don't know. I just remember that experience. It was so funny. Um, so I think that's the end of our questions. Oh, we got one more. What is? Can you help me out, Yulia? Where you're seeing that question? Okay. What do you consider to be the fundamentals? I guess the fundamentals of NLP. I think you've already mentioned this actually.
Yeah, understanding language, being able to perceive what people are doing, establishing relationships, understanding states. If you can just have those things, that's a good start.
Cool.
And then from then you can understand the techniques.
Yeah.
And
focus
people just
on
have to remember that the techniques themselves aren't NLP.
Yeah. Judy Delosier,
Did that come
mutual.
through? I know I'm freezing up a little bit.
Yeah, no, it came through. Judy Delosier, a mutual friend of ours, early on, I was
Okay.
always picking her brain about like how do I master NLP and how do I master it faster. And she said, Damon, the techniques are there to help you build skills. That at some point a technique will fail, but your skills will never fail you. I just took that to heart, and ever since then I was like super focused on just cultivating the skills, and that's exactly what the NLP techniques are there for, because the technique is not going to always work. And it's not it's something that's kind of static, and so it's the skills, your adaptability, how do you adapt to the technique, and how you can adapt the technique to what it is that you're doing, and then drop the technique if it's not working and pick up another technique that does. So it's really about your skills than it is the techniques. I think we got a little bit of a delay on Sid's feed. Okay. All right, so it's probably a good time to close this out. I really appreciate you being here, Sid, and really looking forward to what you're going to teach next week. And as I mentioned, if you want to get in on this and you're not one of our programs,
I
make sure you.
promise. I promise that technical glitches will be cleaned up by next week.
Somebody just asked a quick question, and I'll tackle this one really quick. Do you ever focus on content and NLP? And so here's the thing: we focus on structure. The implication there is you have to have some content to structure, right? So it's not that we don't think content is important. It is absolutely important. The structure, though, is what really tells you how to feel and what to think and what meaning to make of the content. So there's so much content in you from all of your experiences, all of your representations inside of you. So what NLP does is we go in there and we restructure that content to make it serve you and to help it propel you in going forward in life to create what it is that you want, to feel the way that you want to feel about yourself, and to create the life that you want to live. Sid, you got anything you want to add to that? Hopefully you might be frozen. I think
Practice. It's all about skills.
Mhm. Okay. I think it was a good place to end it here because of the technical issues. But yeah, so we'll have these ironed out when Sid comes next week to teach. Look forward to that very much. And then if you want to get in on this, make sure you sign up now. All right. Take care, everyone. And thank you, Sid. And we'll, I guess, maybe stay on and we'll see if we can talk after and sort this out. All right. Take care, everybody.